Hey everybody. Well, it's Thursday evening and I would have been all excited about going up to Julian tomorrow. So far I'm not sick, but having been around my wife enough since she came home that to some extent I'm just waiting for the other shoe to drop, but maybe I won't get it. She's sequestered off someplace else. And I want to talk to you about the essay that we would have discussed in class today. So this is from a book edited by several people, three friends of mine actually, who are all psychologists. Well, one's a theologian and a couple of psychologists, and it was a book on Wesley and the social sciences, with essays by a lot of different people, including yours truly. And I was asked to talk about the category or the idea of Wesley and nature. I start this essay with a quotation from Wesley from when he was 43 years old. He was born in 1703 and died in 1791. And it's a fairly famous quotation from Wesley. I'm a spirit that's come from God and returning to God. It's quite dualistic. It seems to offer a notion of salvation that's escapist. The soul's escape from this world of materiality and so on. And I begin by saying, the interesting thing is that as Wesley got older, his ideas about salvation changed quite dramatically. Of course, you can read about that here, but he became more and more convinced about a more holistic understanding of salvation, tied in, I think, partly with the idea that salvation comes from the same Latin root. Well, it is the Latin root salvus. We get our word salve or salve from this root, which is about a healing ointment or agent that brings about health or restoration of after a wound. So salvation is less about a kind of saving, especially if the saving is a saving of my soul or my spirit away from this material world, and really more about salving or saving. We actually use another word, salvaging, sometimes. But to salve or to salve a wound is to bring healing to it. And what Wesley began to see is that the healing takes place, or at least begins in this life, and it certainly involves our spiritual lives and relationships, but is not restricted to that. And the older he got, the bigger his and more holistic his ideas about salvation became, which I think is really one of the great stories about John Wesley. And so this chapter begins with that shift in his ideas that actually became, in his later years, he became quite enamored with the idea of all of creation and all of creation's creatures enjoying a future life in the age to come. It wouldn't have been because they have souls, even though as a young man he wrote his master's thesis at Oxford University on the question of whether or not animals had souls. And I don't think he said no. I'm not sure if he said yes. I've never read his master's thesis. But it's interesting that he was, exploring that question as a young man. I think given the kinds of texts that he employs, Romans 8, of which we've already talked in the creation groaning text, and some others, that he anticipates a resurrection. And resurrection is always about something more and something different from like my soul surviving death. Resurrection in the Bible, and certainly especially in the New Testament, has to do with our bodies and with the body in general. And as he got older, he became, I think, more and more aware of this. So in the beginning, the next section there on page 22, I talk about what does it mean to be created in God's image. I think that Wesley very often was wrong about his ideas. Oops, what happened here? Now I had that. Oh, heavens. What in the world? I'm trying to. Oh, I keep. You know, when you. Well, what am I? Hello? This is embarrassing. How do I bring that text back up? Oh, let me try this. Hold on. Let's see if I can salve this this presentation. So far, no. Where did it go? Did I delete it? There it is, Wesley Nature. See if it comes back up in a. It's still partial screen. Well, that's no good. All right, well, let me just riff for a little while. I wanted to have it in front of me, and I don't have my book at home, and I probably won't be going to school tomorrow. But essentially, I think the big points in this as we go forward is that Wesley, even though he had this tendency to think about being in God's image as meaning something like that we have a spirit, and this spirit survives our physical death. And I'm not saying he ever entirely got rid of that idea, but I think he began to play with some other imagery that I think is more helpful. And not that he originated this. I think scholars think he got it from Isaac Watts, a great hymn writer of whom you may have heard. I'm not sure which ones he wrote, but he wrote some big ones. He was a contemporary of Wesley's. And Wesley seems to have gotten from Watts, who may have gotten it from somewhere else, that the image of God can be thought of under three dimensions or aspects. I don't know that this is, I think it's a helpful way to look at it. The first is the natural image. The natural image of God would include something like the spirit or soul. It would, for Wesley, include our capacity for thought, reason, although he was quick to point out that he thought animals could do a lot of that as well, especially as he got older. So it wasn't so, I think it was mostly the spirit. Now, in the famous sermon, The General Deliverance, which is based on Romans 8, he actually doesn't say that what makes human beings unique is that we have or are a soul or spirit. What he says is that human beings are capable of God. And then he says that is capable of knowing, enjoying, and obeying God. And he denies that other creatures are able to do that in this current state, in this life. But that's when he speculates about in the resurrection in the age to come. Why not imagine that animals, if human beings become like the angels, and for him, that was sort of on a cosmic scale that we'd be bumped up a level from being humans to angels. He assumed then, well, why couldn't we say that about all the other creatures? Maybe they all get bumped up a level, and whatever a level would entail. So for at least some creatures, he speculated that in the age to come, they would be capable of knowing, loving, enjoying God, which was a generous move on his part, I think, in the 18th century. So the natural image would be like those capacities or abilities that are unique to humans. Again, as Wesley got older, he was more and more hesitant to, isolate certain abilities of human beings and say, that's the natural image. But I think usually it would be soul or spirit. I have my own issues with that, but for now we'll just leave that there. That would be the natural image. Then the moral image, and this is actually the most important to Wesley, that human beings are created to reflect God's moral character. And I love that for Wesley, this really boils down to love. If you read, I know I have a quotation in there where he talks about God as basically as love, capital L, flaming forth, and that human beings were and really are intended to receive that love of God that God is, and in essence, allow that love both to flow through them and reflect off of them in terms of their own unique creaturely capacities and personalities when it comes to humans and some animals, and to reflect that love. But this is especially the calling or the vocation of human beings, and that's the moral image. The moral image is like this possibility. It's not an inevitability, but the possibility that we may reflect God's character of self-giving, other-receiving love. Then the third aspect, so you have natural, moral, and political. The political image or the political aspect of the image is not about politics in terms of like human, social relations and economics and so on. It's actually about the polis, P-O-L-I-S, of the whole living world, and that human beings have been entrusted with a role, a responsibility to especially reflect and represent God's character of everlasting love to all of the rest of creation. Certainly to one another, but really in terms of the political image, it's about human beings in relationship to the more than human world. And so Wesley has these three aspects. And I'm going to pause here now and come back and talk about that a little bit more.